Have you ever felt like you were finally healing?
Yep.
And then suddenly something hits you so hard and you feel like you're right back where you started? Mm-hmm. Maybe an old trigger resurfaces. Grief comes back unexpectedly. I know I've felt that. Anxiety spikes again. Maybe you react in a way that you thought that you had already healed from, and immediately you start feeling shame. And you think, why am I back here again? I thought that I had already healed from this. Maybe I haven't healed at all.
Yeah, and honestly, that can be super discouraging.
Yeah.
And incredibly hurtful and feeling that pain again. And especially for believers, I think this is where we think as Christians, everything should just be going up, should be smooth, everything should be steady and predictable, and it's not.
Right. And the thing that we have to remember, the thing that we're going to look at today, is that the Bible does not show growth in that way at all. It's actually full of lament and wailing and people being set back to where they started, people in experiencing waves of grief all throughout the Psalms, wilderness seasons, repeated surrender, having to turn something over and over and over again back to God. So we are going to talk today about why healing is often not linear at all. And that doesn't mean that you're failing.
Right.
Welcome to Hope Through the Hard, a curated coalition podcast where we talk honestly about life struggles and how to face them in healthy, hope-filled ways. In 2 Corinthians 4, Paul says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." That's the purpose of this space. Real conversations about the hard things in life and the hope that carries us through. Visit curatedcoalition.com to find our coaching services and book a free consultation.
Hi, I'm Levi. This is Ashley, and Lincoln's running production today. Yep. And you have a kid question?
Yes.
He's like excited about this. I'm kind of scared.
Worried. Nervous now.
Uh-huh.
What is your least favorite book?
Oh, least favorite book. Oh, you and I have been over this multiple times.
Yeah.
Much to the dismay of many Christians, I'm not a big fan of Narnia. Holes. I never liked Holes.
Nope. I'm waiting for the next one.
I can see the cover. The Giver, that's the one. I can see the cover. I don't like The Giver. I do not like the David Livingstone biography. Hate that.
You're absolutely going to hate mine, but I'm going to wait for Dad to go.
Okay. Yeah, my list of books that I don't love is pretty much anything in the fantasy genre.
Books? Reading? Sure.
Poor Dad. You have to pick a book, babe. A book you don't like.
A book that I don't like.
That you don't like.
If there was a book that I didn't like reading, I probably put it down and didn't continue to read it and said,
No, it's
check out.
Where the Red Fern Grows.
Yeah.
Where the Red Fern Grows, yeah.
Yes.
Worst book ever.
That's a sad one.
Worst book
That's
ever.
a sad one.
That one is also
Read that one.
potentially wretched.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we do agree on that one for sure.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's a consensus. It's on the shelf back there.
Yeah.
Where the Red Fern Grows. Hated that book.
Good question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Good question, Link. I like it. All right. So we'll jump back in where we were today. So I think one of the most common misconceptions about healing is the belief that our progress within healing should be constant and not interrupted. And so when someone thinks, oh, I've dealt with this already, I've prayed about this already, I've given this over to God already, I thought I was past it. We think those things, but the problem is that emotionally, neurologically, spiritually, healing isn't in a straight line. And it's often very, very layered. And so I was looking this week for some psychology statistics. And so research on trauma recovery and grief consistently shows that healing is nonlinear, which is not surprising to anyone who's attempted to heal.
Right.
So symptoms often resurface during, not surprising again, stress, transition, maybe a move, relocation, job change, those sorts of things, anniversaries, maybe an anniversary of a death or an anniversary of a relationship that has ended, relational conflict, obviously, and emotional overwhelm.
Yeah.
So these things are often very true for trauma survivors because the nervous system heals gradually. Stress can temporarily reactivate those survival patterns that we built in long, long ago.
Yeah. And what we definitely are trying to say today is that setback doesn't mean complete regression from all of that you've been doing. It's just maybe it's a step back, but you're going to find out, hey, I can keep going and I can keep growing. It's just part of the path.
Yeah. And I think when a lot of times when you step back and, when it feels like regression, but you're stepping back and you're walking through something again, we talked about that last week. Like your nervous system requires that repetition. And so it just, your nervous system, when that happens, has encountered something that you still need to support it because it's still processing whatever that is.
Right.
And that can feel frustrating. But it's not that you're set back or that you're stepping back or that you're falling behind. There's no timeline.
Right.
So have you ever had a season where you felt like God healed something in you and then you found yourself struggling with it again? So essentially, have you ever been in this situation?
Of course, because we all have. We've all been in those situations where, and that's kind of how our body works, right? Is that whenever we start to feel unsafe in a situation, it'll bring up memories, and our inner child's going to respond in a set way of, hey, this reminds me of this, and now I'm scared. And so I'm going to have a response and be drawn back to being that kid in that situation. And that looks like different things through burnout. And you start having stress at work. It could be that situation. Been there. Grief is something that we think, okay, well, the funerals happen. Now I've grieved them. But there's going to be seasons, even years after somebody's been gone, something's going to trigger. And it could be a smell. It could be something that you see. Or it's just God just throwing something into you and saying, hey, here's this cool memory. Yeah, it's kind of sad, but it's also because they're gone, but it's also a great memory to remember, hey, this person was in your life. And here's some good stuff to remember too. It may trigger back, but God's trying to move us forward into this great healing process that is messy still.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's easy to think that everyone else doesn't experience those things. And you were talking about, grief being one that, you think that time has passed. And I know for me, with our little girl that we lost between the boys, sometimes big years are like, when she was 10, that was a horrible one for me because 10 seems like, a big number, a big celebration. It was a big thing with all of our other kids. And so it was a huge emotional pull for me. And I did not do okay that year at all. It was very hard. And so, yeah, I think that we just have to be patient with ourselves and we have to understand that those things are going to happen, and that if that's you, if you are in a season like that, or if a loved one is in a season like that, God will meet you there. Right. And you have to be willing to let him, but he wants to do that, and he wants to walk you through that healing process.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of Christians quietly carry shame because they think that their healing should look like a steady process, that it should look polished and emotionally controlled and spiritually impressive. And I think church culture often reinforces the expectation that those things should be happening. And so people feel pressure to be hopeful and look like they've got it all together. They're powering through it. They're strong. And not to use defeated language,
Right.
to always say like, oh no, I'm doing great. The Lord is walking me through it, which is true.
Right.
But sometimes that walking you through it is messy.
Yeah.
And then they also feel like they can't cry. They have to just appear emotionally even. They if you lose it in worship, that's bad or wrong. And so I think that church culture is in direct contrast to what we see in the Bible, because Scripture is very honest about the human struggle. And I think that the Bible shows us, we're going to look today at some of these, just a couple really, verses, but we have an entire book of lament. Like Lamentations is an entire book of lament. We see confusion. I mean, often the people in relationship with God and pursuing God are confused about the path that he is pulling them down and walking them down. Fear. I mean, the Bible says, do not fear 365 times. Obviously, humans are prone to fear. That's not new to God. Right. We see people walking through grief. One of the most famous verses is that Jesus experienced grief. He wept. He lost a friend, and it moved him to have a very raw emotional experience. We see people who are discouraged. We see people who are exhausted. We've talked multiple times about, Elijah like collapsing under the broom tree and just totally exhausted. People in seasons of waiting when, God's promised them something, a child, and they wait for years and years and years. And the Israelites are wandering in the desert, waiting for 40 years. We see people who are angry. Immediately you hear anger, and I think of the story when Peter cut someone's ear off. We see people crying. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where the Bible tells the whole story and gives you the story. And I think it's great of watching David, especially in a lot of his, of sharing the middle. Not the beginning and not just the end, but the middle as well. And I think that's where a lot of Christians have a hard time. We don't think we can share our testimony. We don't share our struggles in the middle of the situation. We just think, well, I can't do anything until I'm fully healed, until my story's resolved and I have all this. And then look, here's what God did from here to here. But what about the middle? Because that's where the hope has to really be entered in, I think, to a lot of people, to share of, hey, I'm working through this and it's okay. God's got me. And sometimes those are the situations and the times when people need to understand it's okay to feel safe in that middle area.
Yeah. Well, and I think in the middle is when isolation creeps in. That's when people assume that everyone else is healing.
Yep.
And
Or
they're
healed.
doing it perfectly.
Right.
And so I think that this is truly, if you are a pastor, this is one of the reasons why people are struggling in your church. Because they feel like they are only allowed to, like you said, give a testimony and to testify about healing when God has wrapped that up in a nice, tidy, neat bow and put it under the Christmas tree for you, And that's just not the way that most healing happens. It doesn't look neat. It doesn't look pretty. And it's often not tied up in a bow. It's in the middle. It's when you're still grieving, when you're still regulating, when you're still learning how to set boundaries and implement boundaries. And your nervous system is still relearning what's safe for me right now. Is this person safe? How do I know if this is a safe situation? And when you're still having hard days. And so when churches unintentionally, and I emphasize unintentionally, create a culture where only the polished victory story and the neat, tidy bow story are acceptable, people hide. They hide the humanity that God wants to meet them in.
Yeah, and whenever we hide that pain, that's when it starts getting really heavy, and it's hard to hold on to. And then we just think, well, now I have to hold on to it because I'm not telling anybody because I might be weak in their eyes, and so I've got to just hold on to this.
Yeah, and that leads into shame, right? Because then you're dealing with it on your own, and you're assuming that you're the only person who's dealt with this, and so you're still struggling. So now I'm failing, And if you're still overwhelmed, then, now is my faith really even real? And if I'm triggered, then maybe I haven't healed at all.
Right.
But Scripture doesn't present transformation that way. And that's the Bible is honest about the process. David laments repeatedly. Peter struggles repeatedly. Paul speaks about his weakness very openly. And I think that one of the things that churches can recover is the ability to be honest about the middle, about the process, not just about the ending.
Right.
So what do you think happens to people emotionally and spiritually when they feel like they have to hide the struggle to belong in church?
Well, it becomes emotional isolation. We separate. We can't be a part of that, or we don't feel like we're good enough to join into the conversations of anything, or kind of even be into a lead position. This also leads to pastors. I believe all pastors sin. And they're all also hiding it. And that's something else that I see as a struggle in so many churches, is that pastors aren't given that ability to share freely. Hey, I'm in the middle of something and I'm struggling. And if you are, then you've got to be out.
Yeah.
You're not good enough to be in that. When God's like, hey, I used all these other people through bigger things than what you guys are doing, and they were struggling worse than what you are. And so I think we need to show some grace. We need to give people the ability to have a little bit of hope and grace during this time of that, and not run to isolation, because that shame cycle will continue to go there. And whenever we stay quiet, it gets heavier and heavier.
Yeah. And that's what I want to focus on, because the whole theme of the last few episodes is that God works in our humanity and not around it.
Yep.
And healing does not require that you pretend and that you act like you're unaffected by what you're walking through. It really, truly requires that you're honest and that you're emotionally available, so that God can come in and heal you. Like that's part of what he wants to do. He could automatically just touch us and offer us the healing, but the process is how we walk someone else through it. It's how we bring someone else to faith,
right,
by allowing them to see us walk through the middle and see our messy, and then they can recognize and understand that, okay, what I'm experiencing is the same as what she's experiencing. And if she's finding healing, then God will meet me too.
Well, and I think this is something I learned in student ministry with our outreach events and stuff like that we would have after school programs. You want to find out somebody, because we all have problems. Yeah. We all have pain. We all have struggles that we're dealing with. Sometimes we're this side of that struggle, and sometimes we're on this other side. But whenever that middle part happens, I've watched so many teenagers who get quiet or show up. They're just there. They're not talking to anybody, not willing to talk to anybody. And you really want to do some ministry, do some real discipleship, go talk to them and just sit with them and walk through it, because that's what has to happen to bring hope to somebody. Is whenever they feel unseen, they may only show up one time and then they're out. So start opening up your eyes, and if you're seeing people not talking, not doing anything, just sitting there, there's a reason. And partly because they probably don't feel like they're good enough, or they're going through something. And if everybody knew what I did, same as the guy that's standing up there on the stage singing the songs or preaching the word or whatever it might be, if you knew what they did, we all have problems. And that this is something that to be able to be on a lookout for, to say, hey, here's somebody that probably is struggling, and happy to help them.
Yeah. That's a good reminder that quietness is usually an indicator that there is something below the surface.
Correct.
That probably needs support.
Yep.
Not isolation and not shame, but true support.
Right.
And so you mentioned David a little bit ago as being one of the primary examples in Scripture. And we see through the Psalms and, through some of the other stories about David, that he revisits grief, that he revisits fear and distress throughout many of the Psalms. Psalm 13, for instance, begins, "How long, O Lord, how long will you forget me forever? Like,
Right.
have you forgotten about me? And I think that's something that a lot of people feel.
Yep.
Probably more than once in their life. Psalm
Right.
42 says, "Why so downcast, O my soul?" So these are not isolated emotional moments. They're recurring waves. They're waves of grief, waves of fear, waves of isolation. David didn't become the man of God, the man after God's own heart, because he never struggled emotionally. He became faithful by repeatedly bringing those said struggles to God and letting God walk him through them. And so I'm going to read a little section from Lamentations, and it says, "Remember my afflictions and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall. My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness." And so I think the thing that I love about this is that the hope doesn't exist in the absence of pain. It exists in the pain.
Right. Yeah. Paul does a great job of describing some of those situations as well. 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10. "So to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn has been given in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited."
Yeah.
Man, somebody needs a thorn. If Paul got one, don't we all?
Yeah.
3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecution, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." I think that verse is huge, of just saying this weakness thing that everybody's afraid of, I think hey, Paul was happy about it. Oh, okay, I'll be weak because this is how cool it is, because yes, we all are, but then how great God shines in those situations from our struggles and our weaknesses.
Yeah. I think that grace is experienced often in our ongoing weakness. And Paul, that's what he's talking about. It's not just after the weakness disappears,
Right.
which is what we all want,
Yes.
is just for our weakness to disappear. So setbacks, you've talked about the setbacks, you mentioned them, and how they often trigger shame because people interpret that emotional recurrence of whatever that they're experiencing in the trigger as failure. Maybe that looks like, I thought I forgave them, or I thought I healed from this, or I thought this anxiety, I thought I was past it. I really thought I trusted God more than this. But healing doesn't erase our human vulnerability. And that's what, is hard for us to understand. But again, some research, this specifically is in neuroplasticity and emotional memory. So the research around neuroplasticity, which is our ability to build new neural pathways, and our emotional memory, demonstrates that the brain retains previously strengthened neural pathways even as newer, healthier pathways are being developed. So for me, I kind of think about this like a new road you might be paving it. You might be, laying gravel and, pulling the machinery over it. You're laying that new road,
Right.
and maybe you're going to put some asphalt over that. But the trail that runs next to it is still there.
Right.
The walking path that you previously used next to the new road that you're building still exists and will exist for a while. So studies published through the NIH and through other research in effective neuroscience shows that stress, grief, exhaustion, and emotional overwhelm temporarily reactivate those old survival-based patterns, those pathways associated with fear, hypervigilance, anxiety, and emotional protection. So at the same time, newer, healthier pathways are still forming, but a return to our old reaction hasn't disappeared because that neural pathway still exists. Right. And so this is important, I think, because people assume that if they were truly healing, that they wouldn't respond and react the same ways over and over again. But that's just not how the brain works. It changes slowly. It changes through repeated experiences, and it's gradual. It's not an immediate thing. Like if you think about how long it takes a road to form, and how much foot traffic you have to have, that's the same concept. And so under stress, our nervous system defaults toward what we're familiar with. It goes back to the old pathways first, and then it remembers, oh yeah, we're building this new road. Like we're doing something new, but it's going to go to that familiar old footpath first. And because it's the one that it walked for years. So that doesn't mean that the new pathway has disappeared, but it does mean that you're still in the process of learning.
Yeah, and that's where we want to try to continue to, encourage you to keep healing. It's a continual choice. You can choose, forget this, I'm just giving up. But understanding the path, I think, is huge. Yes, you're still going to feel these set ways. And as you train and repeat and continue to do new stuff with this, that's your choice every single time of how I'm going to respond in this situation. I can go to my old way, or I can respond in this new way that I'm trying to build, I'm trying to create. And that's when the healing really takes off, is whenever you start to repeat those new behaviors every single time.
Yeah. I got a message from a client that graduated from our coaching, and she was like, I'm still using my feelings wheel. And I'm like, yep, me too, friend, me too. Yep. But I think that perspective removes a lot of shame when we can look at it like that, because our healing stops becoming our healing questions stop becoming, why am I still struggling? And they kind of reframe to, hey, look, I'm learning something new.
Yep.
I'm learning how to be safe, and I'm learning how to do this new thing. So God works in our humanity, not around it. He designed our brain with the capacity to adapt slowly. And he designed our nervous system to learn through repetition. And he's not impatient with your progress. And he understands. And he's there for you in the hard, messy middle.
Exactly. And I think this is so key that we all understand. You're going to mess up. There's going to be situations. Triggers happen. Sometimes it's small things. And that doesn't mean that you're not healing. I'm healed. I'm good. Just because you've really healed through something doesn't mean that you're never going to trigger again. That may be smaller or may be different, but you're going to have some of those situations come up just because we feel different situations. You could be extremely tired. You could be overworked. You could have something new that's hitting something, and that's also a good time to say, hey, why am I feeling this way? Is there something else happening that I'm feeling? And that's part of the healing process. We heal from one thing, and then we realize there's other things. And so there's other things to heal from whenever we start to open up ourselves really to the core.
Yeah.
So that's why we're saying that this healing pattern and process is ups and of some different ways of taking place. It's not just supposed to be perfect every time.
Yeah. And I think that, you're talking about how do we measure it then? Well, it's measured by a slower response time where you're a little more aware. It's measured by you're recovering faster from the trigger. That's a huge one.
Yep.
Asking for support, or not being afraid to ask for support, showing yourself compassion instead of shame. What do you think that healthy healing expectations should actually look like?
Yeah, I think some healthy ways, you're going to have gentleness. You're going to have some grace, but there's got to be patience through this from everybody around. somebody that's growing or to a healing process needs some patience whenever they're dealing with those types of stuff, and faithfulness in the process of saying, okay, yes, this is hit harder this time than it did last time. Or maybe, hey, I'm just trying to understand this process of in life coaching that we give of steps to walk through this. Trust the process because it's not simple, and it's going to hit every week a little bit different. And trusting God with everything that he loves you no matter what in the unfinished places of who you are.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that when people experience the setbacks that we're talking about, they panic and they think, oh my gosh, I'm back at square one. I haven't done any healing.
Or God's not going to love me anymore,
right.
And I'm a terrible person. And
How long will you leave me, Lord, forever? I mean, that Psalm kind of Psalm, what was 13, I think, but that question comes back. But that's not how our nervous system works. When you're healing, you are creating new pathways. You are creating more awareness within your own body. Your capacity is growing and strengthening, and you're learning new skills about how you can regulate yourself. Yes, your old emotions are going to surface because things are going to trigger you.
Right.
But a healed person can still feel grief and get triggered and have hard days. And healing is not mean that you are supposed to be emotionally invincible. Like, you don't just turn into Superman because you've walked down some healing pathways, right? It's got to be flexible and aware and resilient, not rigid.
Right. And I think that's the key part of understanding the pathway, and what we've kind of hit on the past couple of episodes of before, during, and after healing. And before healing, people are feeling emotions. Fear is the big one. Avoiding vulnerability, because then that means I have to really look at me. And may draw out some stuff. Judge ourselves harsher is going to happen until we really start to look at it, because that weight is going to continue to get heavier and heavier as we keep it inside of ourselves.
And during healing, I think people start noticing. That's the big word for in the middle of healing, that you start noticing. You start noticing patterns and grief waves and your triggers and your responses and your struggles. And this stage, again, it feels discouraging because your awareness is increasing, because you're noticing. Sometimes it feels like this is harder than it was before you started healing. It's going to be harder before it gets easier. And that's just because you're noticing what you used to suppress.
Yep. And then after healing, which the continual growth of that, you're going to see some different responses. Some compassion's going to happen. You're going to respond quicker with understanding your triggers. And so instead of being triggered for a week, you may be triggered for 3 days, or you might be triggered for 1 day. And so it's learning some of those situations and being able to say, hey, I've learned these responses. I've learned the flags of the triggers of these things and how to move forward. And I accept my humanity. I accept that I'm a messed up person that's going to mess up, and that's okay. And I have grace with that because I trust God and his process to continue to work through me through the situation and whatever else he has for me to work through as well.
It's not perfect, but it's better.
Yes.
That's the goal. So Matthew 26:38 says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow. So I just want to remind you that even Jesus experienced grief and anguish, distress, and emotional overwhelm. He didn't hide it, and he named it. He shared it. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow. He is saying, overwhelm, I feel that. Sorrow, I feel. So he names it. He shares it. He shares it not with the whole world, but with his friends, with those who he knows will be there for him and who will support him and pray for him. He prays through it on his own, and he invites others to be close to him. So our faith is not proven by our ability to suppress things.
Right. Yeah, and I think maybe one of the most healing statements is to believe and to learn is that humanity is not failure, because God created us. He created us exactly like he wanted us to be perfect in the garden. But then in this situation, here's how it is. He still created us to process, to think, to feel, and to work through these situations. So it's not just failure. It's a building a relationship with him more is where it's really at, and growing to be the person that God wants us to be.
Yeah. So what do you do? That's the question. So now what, right? When old pain resurfaces, don't panic.
Yep.
Don't jump to shame, and don't assume that everything that you've worked for is gone out the window. You're a failure. We're not doing that. Instead, what we want you to learn to do is to notice, to name, to practice those somatic grounding techniques that we've talked about. Invite God in. Look for, just like Jesus did, look for support. Find your people who will pray with you and for you. And then come back to the truth gently. Come back to the truth. What does God say about who you are? What are the scriptural affirmations that you need to pray over yourself? What do you need to believe about yourself? Because our setbacks are invitations to places where we can have a deeper healing, a more true healing. They're not evidence that our healing has failed.
Right.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who feels discouraged because they thought that they were just past this already? They've already done this work. And then they're set back.
You're not alone. I think is huge, is because this all happens to all of us. We've all gone through these paths of healing, and we're still learning of some of the getting deeper and deeper into the core of some of the stuff of our trauma and our reactions. Is it's going to be a continual thing, and not to give up. Find somebody to talk to and walk through it, I think is the key thing. And you may find out there's more to it, and it's going to be a lot more. That's why a lot of people we've talked to, whenever we're saying, hey, life coaching is something that everybody needs, is true, and everybody says yes, agree, but
They're afraid. Yeah.
And scared because, well, if they knew all the things I did, and if they knew how I really felt, okay.
So what, you're human?
Yeah, right. We're human, and you're going to mess up. And I think that's why we want to help as many people as we possibly can through life coaching, which is why we're doing this, because we understand this healing time is huge, and to make all of us to be better, and to really actually also share the gospel with other people of being truthful, not the fake people, not the I look like I have it all together, but here's humanity, here's who God is in His grace, and we all mess up, and I think this is a part where finding somebody to talk to is huge.
Yeah, and again, like again and again and again, my mind goes back to Revelation 12:11. The enemy is defeated by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, and when we are afraid to share our messy middle, the enemy wins.
Right.
The enemy wins because someone else needs to hear about our messy middle, and someone else needs to know that there's hope through that. And so if healing is nonlinear for you, it has been for us, right. You're not broken, you're human. Like that's really right. What we want you to understand, right. That your healing is probably not going to move in a straight line. You're probably going to have days where you're crying, where you're grieving, where you're going back to the same prayer that you've prayed 900 times and begging God again and again and again for the same things. I mean, you read the scripture about Paul saying, I've asked God 3 times and He keeps telling me no. And so I guess I'm just going to have to hear His no, right?
Right.
But surrendering again, just like Paul did, like again and again, like I want this thorn removed, but it's not. And so surrendering to whatever His will is for you again, and choosing to see the hope again, even when it's not the answer that you wanted or it's not working the way you wanted. That's not failure. That's right. Healing.
Right. And progress doesn't completely disappear because pain resurfaced. Mm-hmm. It just means that we're still working through it. Yeah. Satan also is going to do as much as he can to tear you down. He's going to make you have fear. He's going to show you pain. He's going to show you that, oh, you're not good enough, and those different temptations, or having others look down upon you. You still have progress. and it's not thrown away or done away with just because you start to feel that pain again.
Yeah. God is with you. He's present. He's in the middle of your process. He's in the middle of your setbacks. He's with you in the grief, and he wants to help you with your slow rebuilding as a way to offer hope, not just in your own life, but to the people around you.
Yep. Some reflection questions we kind of want to hit with you all and to kind of think about. Do I interpret reoccurring emotions as failure? I think that's a huge one to say. Do I just see myself as failure? How has church culture shaped my view of emotional struggle? I think is a big thing to kind of say, because we think we're just supposed to be perfect and everything's supposed to go smooth.
And is that the church culture or is that Bible?
Right. Correct. and that's what we really want to dig into, want to have conversations about and discuss through that. And what if healing is allowed to be gradually layered and human?
Yeah, because if you let your healing be layered and human, it's not going to look like a pretty neat line with a bow tied up at the end. So if this episode hits you, if you feel like you are in the middle of the messy parts and you would like some coaching or some encouragement, you can find our services at curatedcoalition.com. If this episode resonates with you, send it to someone else who you think it might also help. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us for today's conversation. My hope is that you leave here reminded that whatever you're facing, you're not crushed, abandoned, or destroyed. That's the promise of 2 Corinthians 4:8-9 and the heartbeat of hope through the hard. Visit curatedcoalition.com for all of our coaching services or to book your free consultation. We'll see you next time.